post. He's out. William on the drive. Pull up. Got it!
A grand slam for Masters. Witherspoon in the corner, on the way and good.
More big hit in him. A bomb. Shapen, wide open, caught across the middle. Thompson, touchdown! Mississippi State, the national champions.
Wrap it in maroon and white.
Welcome to the Bulldog Breakdown presented by the Bulldog Student Sports Network. My name is Connor Davis, and today you're used to hearing us on the radio, but we're giving you a brand new product. Now you're seeing us on your screen. We're covering Mississippi State sports from a student perspective. Alongside me is my co-host, Ty Golmon, and for today's show, we're going to talk about volleyball, soccer, and football. But to get us started, Ty has a little bit of info on other sports. So what do you have for us, Ty?
Well, for Mississippi State, men's golf and women's golf are playing a little bit. They have been going to a couple of tournaments and some invitationals. Men's golf placed first in the Cullen Brown Collegiate Tournament last week in Lexington. Women's golf third in the Blessings Collegiate Invitational last week overall. I think that was actually on October 1st they placed that. Both teams have a couple more events coming up. They've done it well so far as a whole. Women's tennis and men's tennis is more of the singles part of the season here. You have the fall and you have the spring. 4 Lady Dogs will be representing Mississippi State at the ITA Regional Championships that are going on this week. And up to this point during the week, this should be released at some point during the week, they have had some success. Men's tennis has had 2 Bulldogs that have qualified for the NCAA Singles Championships in November. They qualified for those last week during the ITA Southern Regional Championships. And then you have some other sports that aren't quite exactly playing yet, but are kind of preparing for their season. Softball preparing for their season with a win over Alabama last Saturday in a scrimmage, 4-0. Baseball has a scrimmage this weekend on Saturday against the Florida State Seminoles. Men's basketball, further on down the line, will have a scrimmage against Houston. And women's basketball also getting into things as well. So both of those teams back to practice. Men's and women's basketball starts at the beginning of November, so that's coming up here very quickly. And that's kind of a recap of all of our other sports. And then we'll talk a little bit about volleyball here and soccer and football later on in the show.
Yes, and we will end up covering those other sports when they get into season. But let's go into a sport that's in season right now, volleyball. This is your most successful season. You started 11-0 for the first time in program history. You have Ole Miss, you have Texas A&M, the number 9th ranked Aggies. What do you think about those 2 games? Kind of cover them for me, and then I'll give you a little bit of what I have as well.
So yes, last week you faced Ole Miss, won that match 3-1. Good win over your in-state rivals, and you played number 9 Texas A&M. Fell in that one 3-0. You look at the Ole Miss game first. Really battled back. It really battled that entire game. It was really a close match between the 2 teams. Set 2 was a set in which State won. That one was a back and forth one. Showed a lot of grit, Mississippi State did in that set. They were able to win that. Fell in set 3, wasn't able to complete the sweep, but you battled back in the final set to win. You were down by a couple of points during that set, and you battled back. You were able to win. Something that they needed to clean up in that one, which we did in the A&M game, although the A&M game didn't go our way. 28 errors in that game against Ole Miss. Got to be able to clean it up, not be, maybe if there wasn't so many errors for Mississippi State in that game, it would have been a lot more, it wouldn't have been as close as it was, and you have, so yeah, State did a really good job in that one, able to win the ball game. Julie Darty Dennis's 100th career win in that game, so definitely a big milestone for her. A&M game went just really, honestly, completely different. A&M dominated the game. They won 3-0. Won by 7 in those first two sets. Their hit percentage in that game was .264 compared to State's .131. I mean, that's really an insane 2 numbers to look at. And when you look at that too, you look at the final set, and the final in that one was 26-24. A&M won, obviously, to win the game 3-0. But with a hit percentage like that for the total match so high and so heavily influenced from one team and so lowly influenced from another team, it really makes you think about, if you play that way in the third set, you would have if you play that way for the rest of the game, you'd have a way greater chance of, or much greater chance of being able to compete and win a game against a ranked team. 10 ties, 5 lead changes in the 26-24 set 3 defeat.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. That third set that you end up losing 26-24, you play like that in the entire game, you have a really good chance of beating that number 9th ranked Texas A&M team. But let's take a look. Overall, you're 13-3 on the season. Those 3 losses come from Auburn, Texas, the number 2 ranked team in the country at that time, and now A&M. You lost all those games. You went scoreless, 0 sets to 3 sets. You couldn't put anything on the board. This year, you're 1-2 against ranked opponents. That one win coming from the 19th ranked Florida, you beat them 3 sets to 2. You have really tough losses if you're this Mississippi State team. Ty, let's talk about the conference games coming up this weekend. You have South Carolina, you have Georgia. Now you're going to Columbia for South Carolina on Friday. Currently, you're 3-3 in the conference. We talked about their losses earlier, and South Carolina is 1-5 in the conference. So they're not too particularly good when it comes to conference play, but South Carolina just came off a 3-1 victory against Arkansas in Fayetteville. But if you look at those two teams, Arkansas 16th in the conference, South Carolina's 14th in the conference, and State's dead in the middle at 8th. How do you climb that conference ladder if you're Mississippi State with these couple of conference games coming up this weekend?
Just keep the airs down. You had 28 in the Ole Miss game, as I mentioned, only 16 in that A&M game, but it was just A&M that was so, they were so dominant in that game. You talk about the hit percentage, which was an important point in the A&M game. You have to have an efficient percentage there in order to be successful. You got to get some production around the roster. I thought you got some on Thursday, I believe, against Ole Miss, either Thursday or Friday. Can't quite remember when that game was, but you got some production from the roster against Ole Miss. Need to have it against South Carolina. This is a team, like you mentioned, that's back half of the conference, right? You should beat this team. They have just struggled this season, got a win over Arkansas, but you mentioned Arkansas also one of the back half teams in this conference as well. This is a game you should win, and if you look at it, it puts you at 14-3 and 4-3, going up against a really good Georgia team on Sunday. Georgia 11-5 and 3-3 the conference. They have some similar teams that they've played compared to State. They played Duke, who Mississippi State played earlier in the season. They beat Duke, and they also beat South Carolina. So you have to be able to, you need to take care of business against South Carolina. Frankly, that's just a game that you should win. Against Georgia, this is a team that's very similar to you, especially in record, but a team that's just overall very similar to you. They've lost to some ranked teams this season in conference play, but it'll be a tough test on Sunday, but I think Friday against South Carolina, take care of business, win that game, and get yourself to Athens on Sunday.
We'll see how conference play goes for Mississippi State in volleyball, but let's talk about how it's been in terms of soccer. Now, this past Friday, you lost 1-2 against Florida in Gainesville. You dropped 4-2-1 in the conference. Now, your other conference loss was a 2-4 game against the number 7th ranked Arkansas in Fayetteville. So you play that the game before Florida. You have 2 losses now. What's with the recent struggle in conference play, Ty? How do you kind of get over that hump?
Well, there's been a lot of goals that have been scored in those past 2 losses. You have 4 goals scored for Arkansas in the loss in Fayetteville. And granted, that's a tough team to play. Number 7 Arkansas on the road. It's just a tough team to play. State beat them here last year. I look forward to that game really every year now, with State being one of the premier SEC squads in soccer. Now, I look forward to that. I think that'll be an interesting match every single season. But, yeah, they scored a lot of goals in that game. State got out in front early, too. 2 early goals in the ball game gave the Bulldogs the lead, and then you give up 4 straight, 4-2. Look at the Florida game. That 2 goals may not seem like a lot, but it turned out to be enough. 2 goals in that one, so 6 goals over the last 2 losses for Mississippi State. Only 1 goal in the game for State against Florida. Zoe Main with that goal. State had a lot of opportunities late. Florida goalkeeper did a really good job, and the Florida defense did a really good job of making some stands. There was a great kick save at the end of the Florida game. Zoe Main had a shot into the bottom left corner of the goal, and it was a kick save. And that was with about 3 minutes left in the game. Would have tied it, and we may be sitting here discussing a draw rather than a loss for MSU. And one big thing too, Allie Perry was out of the game at minute 57. She got red carded at minute 57. Didn't have your best goal scorer in the ball game, or at least for most of the second half. You still possessed the ball more than Florida, which is something that's been pretty common for State this year. It overall didn't matter. Florida just did a good job of having shots on goal when they would shoot. They were very accurate. Ended up scoring 2 out of 9 shots, and just to really encapsulate it, it's not a good loss when you look at it. It's just not. Florida has been a team that's struggled this season, and they've struggled over the past couple of seasons. I get it's on the road. It is what it is. That's a team that you should beat to Florida. I think it's a game that you'll look back and maybe if State's not hosting, or maybe if for some reason come tournament time, that's an important game on the schedule, an important loss for Mississippi State. They fall out of the rankings this week, and RPI is now back to number 27. I believe it was high as number 3, maybe even number 1 in the country this year.
Now, we're used to wearing maroon, like me and you are right now, Ty, but this coming game for soccer, it's a pink out game against the number 21 ranked Vanderbilt Commodores in Starkville this Thursday. Now, you also play Alabama this Sunday in Tuscaloosa. There's a lot of conference play coming up. Now, these teams are super similar, Alabama and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt 10-3-1 on the season. Alabama 10-4-1 on the season. Now, the records are super similar. These are not going to be easy wins for Mississippi State. How do you ensure you come out with 2 victories on this weekend?
Got to do a better job defensively, I would say. Got to keep them out of the box, be able to have some good saves from Sarah Womack at the keeper position, and you got to be able to score a little bit more. I know you've scored 2 in the loss to Arkansas and 1 in the loss to Florida, but let's be able to score a little bit more, have some offensive success. But yeah, you mentioned these teams very similar. They've been very competitive this season. Vanderbilt ranked this year. 2 losses for for Vanderbilt in conference play are to Arkansas, who State also lost to, and to Texas, who Mississippi State beat on the road 3-0. You also have Bama, who is 10-4-1, 4-3 in the SEC. They have been very competitive this season. Had a tie with Duke, who is a very good soccer program over there in Durham, North Carolina. Played close against the University of North Carolina as well. They've been competitive also in SEC play. These are 2 tough teams, and if you look past this as well, you have your final conference game will be against Georgia, who's also ranked. They're number 19. So to close out, you have a very, very tough road ahead of you with these 3 games. You got to play well. You got to play Mississippi State soccer. You've got to keep the ball. You got to be able to attack like we always attack, and play good defense and complementary defense behind that. So I look forward to these next 3 games, especially with the loss to Florida. These 3 games are big, proving games, and will ultimately help you when it comes to tournament time. You have to see how you do in the SEC tournament, but also you have to see these 3 games will also help you when it comes to seeding in terms of the NCAA tournament. Maybe Mississippi State will get to host again. We don't know, but yeah, you get three big games, but the 2 this week are very, very important coming up.
Now, show out and wear pink for that state game against Vanderbilt. Last week we had fall break. There was no Bulldog football action here in Starkville or anywhere else for the fact of that matter, but we did play A&M the week before. Now, they're both maroon teams, but you got to rep maroon when you went to College Station. Tell me a little bit about that trip for the viewers out there, and how was it to kind of root on? I've never been, so tell me about that.
It's a very fun atmosphere. It really is. They are very loud. It was the 5th largest attended game in Kyle Field history, so that was pretty cool to be a part of. They're a very loud crowd, very nice group of people. And that's just kind of the thing along the SEC is you have that hospitality everywhere you go. It definitely showed. I went with a friend, and we had constantly had people coming up to us and asking us, where we're coming from, and they offered food to us at their tailgate. So they were very nice. I have nothing but respect for the A&M fan base, and game didn't go the way we wanted it to, but it was a fun experience, and we'll get in to a little bit of the ball game against A&M and the loss to them.
Yeah, let's go back to that week because you lost 31-9 against A&M, and going into that game, you were a 16.5, 17.5 point underdog. And to me, after watching that Tennessee game in Davis-Wade Stadium, I thought that there was no way you would let A&M score 17.5. I mean, I thought we were a better team than that. And although when you look at all 3 quarters before the fourth quarter, you would think, yeah, you're right, Connor, because you go 7-3 going into half. It's 14-3 going into the fourth quarter, so it's still a ball game. Where does it go 31-9? How does that happen? Now, you didn't have the offense. Their driving was atrocious this game. You had one singular drive that was over 5 plays, and that was the 15-play field goal score, and we saw that to go up. And now you're thinking, how do we ensure that we're not the same Mississippi State team as last year? What's going on? No, the offense didn't stay on the field long at all, but tell me about that A&M game because you were there to experience firsthand.
Yeah, you mentioned I want to cover the offense. You mentioned, not having over 5 plays on any drive except for one in the ball game. That's just not going to work. You have to be able to sustain drives, especially against SEC opponents, especially against ranked SEC opponents, and especially on the road against an SEC opponent. You have to be able to sustain drives. We weren't able to do that. You only had the one drive of 15 plays where we drove down the field and false started on the 2-yard line on 3rd and goal and ended up having to settle for a field goal. So even on the long drive, you made a mistake that kept you out of the end zone. The scoring drive that we had in the fourth quarter, that was, I believe, a 3-play drive, 55 yards, another explosive drive. So you just really you couldn't sustain anything offensively, really couldn't run the football that well, couldn't throw the football. You couldn't do a lot of anything offensively. You lost Fluff Bothwell really later in the game. I thought he ran well, throughout the game. I thought we ran well on first down to start the game, and we just kept trying to throw the football, and is what it is. On first down and second down, we just did not do a good enough job to give our team a chance to convert on third down. 1 for 10 on third downs in the ball games, Connor. Interestingly enough, and we'll talk about Florida's game against A&M, Florida only had 1 third down conversion in their game against A&M. A&M as a team, 2 third down conversions allowed in 3 games, in 3 of their past games against SEC opponents. So that's definitely a stat, just a crazy stat to think about. But yeah, just offensively, you couldn't have much success. But I want to talk about defense, Connor.
No, for sure. But I also want to say that was the name of the game against Tennessee as well. You couldn't keep your offense out there along, and that's what happened when you got into overtime. Your defense just grew tired, and this is what happened against A&M as well. So keeping the offense out there is a big staple because that's what you're supposed to be known for if you're Jeff Lebby. You cannot say, hey, have that contrast in offense and defense that you had last year and then go into these games and not perform as well offensively. It just can't happen. Now, Shapen, he didn't throw the ball terribly. He went 15 for 20, 75%. He had a pick to go with it, but Lebby.
Well, I do want to talk about that pick. And offensively, a lot of it stems from your offensive line. Your offensive line has struggled this season.
For sure.
And
with the injury of Albert Reese.
Exactly. It struggled a lot. Albert Reese, don't know if he's going to play this week against Florida. It struggled a lot this season. That was really the reason why he threw the interception there. He just ran out of time. Defensive line collapsed around him. A&M's got a great defensive line, and we definitely know that after watching the game. But defensive line collapses around Shapen. He just ran out of time. Ball got tipped at the line of scrimmage. We had a guy wide open who would have scored there, and the ball's just tipped. It's an interception. So with that, we're leaving the offense in the past now because I want to talk about defense. Offensive line has got to improve if you want to have any sort of success with the conference play left for you.
Well, you make that pass, the momentum probably shifts. Your defense is playing so well during A&M. I mean, 7-3 going to half. I would say that's a win versus the number 6. They were number 6 at the time. A&M was. So I would say that's a win against an A&M team like that.
The thing, too, people don't really understand. You look at the 31-9 final score. We led for almost 29 minutes in the ball game. It was a one-score game for almost a full 3 quarters. And that's where I want to start talking about our defense. Man, they played incredible. You held them scoreless for 29 minutes, and this is a team that had success against a really good Florida offense or a really good Florida defense last week. A&M's offense scores 34 against Florida, but so they proved that they can play against any of the top-tier defenses in the conference. But State was able to hold the same offense to only 7 in the first half and only 14 through 3 quarters. You go into the fourth quarter, it was a 14-3 ball game. State obviously gave up 17 points defensively in that fourth quarter, but a lot of that just comes from
being on the field.
Being on the field, exactly. Your offense just really didn't give a whole lot to you to help either help you physically and help you mentally. When your offense goes 3 and out the amount of times that we did, obviously it doesn't help you physically, but man, you think about that mentally, and it's just like, oh, I got to go do this again. I got to help us stay in the game. It gets tough. It gets tough on your defense. I think our defense played incredibly well. You can look at the stat line and say whatever you want. A&M had, I believe, over 400 yards, had a lot of yards rushing. You can say whatever you want. You can be a box score warrior and be like, oh, they did this and they did this. Look at the stats. If you watch the game, State's defense kept them in the game, and that is every game this season. Mississippi State's defense has kept them in the ball game and been able to help them have a chance to win. You look at it in the Tennessee game, it's the same thing. Only 20 points given up by Mississippi State's defense in regulation. It's just you got to have support from your offense. But man, when I speak about the defense for Mississippi State, it is a total flip from what it was last year. This defense this year is keeping you in ball games.
And we've talked about it. When you get into conference play in big games like this, you have to play complete. You have to capitalize on these mistakes. Tennessee, you had, 6, maybe 7 drives where you could have went down the field and scored and possibly win the game. It's probably the same for A&M. You score a couple of these times, keep the lead that you had, the momentum completely shifts in Kyle Field.
And you also had big momentum plays by your defense in that game as well. I mean, you had a goal line stand. I know that's tough field position for your offense inside the 5, but you get a goal line stand against A&M in that game, and you also had a pick in that ball game as well. Defense gave you multiple, and not just it being turnovers. There were also multiple times where State forced a punt from Texas A&M that are both big momentum winners in the ball game. And State's offense could just never capitalize. But State's defense gave you multiple opportunities in that game to go take it and go win the ball game, and you just couldn't do it. So I can't speak any better. I mean, State's defense has been incredible this season. I thought they were great against A&M. And one last thing about the A&M game. Ethan Pulliam, man, what a punter he is.
He looks like an NFL punter.
He does.
It's like I'm seeing Logan Cook back there.
He did a really good job. I mean, when you looked at offensively, we couldn't really move the ball as well, but
he could pin him back.
He helped flip the field. He did a really good job in that game. Even when A&M was fielding punts and returning them, they were tough to catch, and State's special teams did a good job of not allowing much on returns. And a lot of it, too, was also A&M held a lot on punt returns, so that helped us as well. But Pulliam made it tough for A&M to return in that game. He did a really good job punting, so props to him, props to the defense. Just got to work on our offense, and I'm sure we focused on that and ways to attack that in the bye week we had in this previous week.
So capitalizing on an opponent's mistake has been an issue for Mississippi State this season, but you have a bye week last week, maybe a perfectly placed bye week. There's been a couple injuries for Mississippi State on this offense. Jeff Lebby, is he prepared for this game going up against Florida? How do you prove that you're not the same team from last year, Ty, with this bye week? Was it perfectly placed? Was this the correct week where we needed this bye week?
I think it was. Coach Lebby mentioned that in the presser on Monday. He mentioned that he thought that this was a perfectly placed bye week. for where this team sits right now. You had a lot of injuries, especially key guys too. Not even just offense. Isaac Smith didn't play in that Texas A&M game, was in a boot for that entire game. He's trying to work and get back healthy this week and have a full practice this week. You mentioned Albert Reese, who didn't play in that A&M game, got hurt in the back half of the Tennessee game. He's trying to work in full practice this week. You lost Fluff Bothwell, who had a lower leg injury in the A&M game towards the end. And he, I think, is doubtful this week, but Coach Levy mentioned he was very pleased and really happy about the progress that he has made coming back from that injury. Hopefully we can see him in the Texas game if we don't see him in the Florida game. But, you have some other things too. You have some other nicks you needed to take care of, and this was a good spot to have your bye week. You've gotten really banged up in these past 2 weeks. I think it's big to have the bye week here and, be able to regroup and find what you're good at, find what you need to work on. And this is a big game coming up for Mississippi State. You don't get to play in Gainesville that much, right? You hadn't played there since 2010, which you've won 10-7. But this is a rare road trip to Gainesville. It's definitely interesting. This is a team in Florida that's on the ropes, lost last week, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But 2-4 overall and 1-2 in conference play. But a team that's on the ropes, and they lost last week to Texas A&M.
Now, before we get into the Florida game, I know you kind of wanted to compare how Florida fared against A&M. Briefly, kind of tell me about that Florida A&M game. What do you see Mississippi State doing better against Florida than what A&M did to get that win?
Well, it was a 34-17 final. The first quarter was very competitive, and I was really surprised to see that. It was 14-14 coming out of the first quarter. Florida gained 157 of their total yards in the first quarter, and then you look at the rest of the game, only 162 yards for the rest of the game. So what that tells me, they just couldn't do anything for the rest of the ball game after the first quarter. Had a great first quarter, outscored 20-3 after that first quarter. Lagway, who had a really good first quarter, only 11 for 25 after that, and no touchdowns. But the thing that was important too is he was accountable for around 80% of Florida's offense in that ball game. And you look at that and you're like, well, how is that possible? They couldn't run the ball. I think they had 74 yards rushing in the game, 1 for 11 on third downs. We spoke to how good A&M's defense is defending third downs. That showed there. Florida couldn't do much with it. It was, like I mentioned, a highly competitive ball game, but A&M just kind of dominated for the rest of the way, sort of controlled the clock in the second half. You saw a lot of things in that game from A&M that you saw in the state game. It was interesting to me that Florida was so successful in the first quarter offensively, because I think that's a really good Texas A&M defense, and Florida's offense just has not been that good this season, and they were able to score with them. It was 14-14 after the first quarter. The rest of the game was a different story, but that's just interesting to see. So, it was I'm sure for Florida fans, another disappointing ball game. You open up so well, and just kind of collapse for the rest of the ball game. So this is a big game for Florida this week, and we'll go into previewing that. But a homecoming game for the Gators against Mississippi State.
Oh yeah, and if you struggle against Mississippi State making this your homecoming game, we might could see a new head coach in Gainesville. I mean, Billy Napier's definitely on the hot seat, and he was last year until DJ Lagway just became DJ Lagway, and then now he's been uneventful. He's been underwhelming this year. He hasn't been what he was going into the season and as a starter last year.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too much time on outside stuff because we're talking about state, but you talk about maybe Billy Napier being let go at Florida. I mean, you had James Franklin be let go at Penn State this week. You've had a lot of you had Mike Gundy let go at Oklahoma State. A lot of different things, a lot of different firings around the country. Excites me a lot for the coaching carousel that we've got coming up, in December and January. But yeah, this is a pivotal game for Billy Napier, and he's going to push all his cards onto the table against Mississippi State.
No, and we've discussed that Fluff Bothwell, he's doubtful. Albert Reese, hopeful for the game against Florida. But let's talk about what State does well offensively. We kind of harped on what they struggled with against A&M offensively, but if you look at it, State is second in the SEC of plays of 40-plus yards with 11 on the season and 50-plus yards with 5. Now, that's 10th nationally with plays over 40 yards. So if we talk about plays over 40 yards, we kind of got to talk about plays under 40 yards. Now, their red zone efficiency, when you look at it as face value, it's pretty great. You're 95.5% in the red zone. That's 15th in the country. 21 out of 22 you've been able to score in the red zone. And if you look at that again at face value, say, hey, you're pretty good. 15th is a really good number compared to the 134 teams in FBS. But you really can't get inside the red zone, and we saw it against A&M for sure. You couldn't get down there. You had one time that you got into the red zone against A&M. Exactly. And you only had, speaking of one time, you only had one against Arizona State. So in big games, you have struggled to get down the field and score. Now, you have these explosive plays that Lebby's been able to get, but you need to stay on the field and get down there, giving your defense a little bit of rest. But how do you ensure as an offense that you can be as good as you were last year? And I mean, you've had moments where you have been a really, really good offense. How do you keep those moments more consistent throughout the game?
I think just in terms of keeping your offense on the field, one thing we have done this season, and from an offensive line perspective, it's been a struggle pass blocking, but I think we've been pretty good run blocking.
I would agree.
I think we've been pretty good there. And, you know, you hate that Bothwell might not be able to go, but you have some guys like, I mean, Devon Booth is an experienced guy. He was your number one back last season, was really good. You have Xavier Gayton, who's a young guy just waiting in the wings there, ready to go. You have Johnny Daniels, who is another guy that was your number 2 back last season that's there. Seth Davis, who is an experienced back on this roster. You have depth at that running back spot. I think you're not going to lack anything really there, because especially I talk so highly about Xavier Gayton. He's an explosive guy that's really fun and will be fun to watch in the coming years when he's wearing the maroon and white. But you have to continue to run block the way you have, continue to run the ball the way you have. You are so good running the football on first downs. It's unbelievable how good we are running the ball on first downs. I think you have to stick to running the football on first downs against Florida. I think on the flip side of that, pass blocking, you got to be able to protect Blake Shapen and give him a chance, any sort of chance. He had multiple opportunities in the game for some deep shots that were open in the game. You had receivers get open downfield in that ball game. It was a little tough more in the middle of the field because A&M did a good job. They have some great linebackers, overall great athletes. It got really congested in the middle of the field, but you had a couple of deep shots that were available. You had a shot early in the game to Anthony Evans on the the Mississippi State sideline. That was incomplete. You had the pick, which was going to be a shot on the A&M sideline. I believe it was to Brennan Thompson. That was open. The long touchdown, your only touchdown of the game, was a shot downfield. I think you've got to be able to protect Blake Shapen to open up these shots. You mentioned how good we are with explosive plays. We got to be able to give Blake Shapen time to create those explosive plays and give receivers time to create separation from defensive backs.
Now, overall, I think you're really, really good running the ball. But Blake Shapen, if we talk about passing, he's thrown a touchdown pass in 21 consecutive games. That's the longest streak in America. There's nobody that's done it like Blake Shapen, and it is a testament to Jeff Lebby. But when you run the ball so good, if it ain't broken, don't try to fix it, Ty. I think as good of a mind that Jeff Lebby has offensively, he gets a little too cute. He starts to overthink. You stick with what works, and if it's running the ball, run the ball down their throat until they stop it. That's what you couldn't do against Tennessee. That's what you couldn't do against A&M. Just do what works. Don't overthink it. It's football.
I think you did that against Tennessee. I really do. I think later in the game it was a little tougher to run the football, but Fluff Bothwell had an amazing game against Tennessee. A bunch of other guys ran the ball really well. Fluff had over 100 yards running the football that game. You did really well running the ball on first downs. That's why I say that we are so good running the football on first downs. You go back and watch us on first down. When we run the ball, the success rate is incredibly high. Against A&M, early in the game we did that. On the first drive of the game, we had a first down. We had a run for a first down, and then 3 plays after that you have to punt. But you see that you can run the ball really, really well on first down. It's you've seen it throughout the season. I think you have to run. I think you're right with running the football. I think you have to not as much rely on it, but definitely understand that it is a successful part of your offense. Run the football, help out your offensive line a little bit, give your quarterback some time. Maybe the run game will take some or put some defenders in the box for Florida in the ball game. This is a really good defense, but if you can get some defenders in the box and hit on some quick passes behind those defenders that are in the box, or maybe hit on something deep, if you get some time from your offensive line, you could have a really good offensive game. But Florida as a whole, 33rd in the country defensively in total defense. This is a defense that Coach Lebby mentioned has so much talent everywhere. And it's like that in the SEC. When you play against SEC opponents, it's going to be like that. But this is a really good defense. It's been their strong point. It's what's kept them in ball games. But on the flip side of that, this is an offense that has struggled. 99th in the country in total offense, and they've turned the ball over a lot, Connor.
Now, you got to capitalize on that. We talked about conference play, playing complete. Capitalizing means you don't give up 31 points. And I know our defense has played great. We look at it and say you were tired going into that fourth quarter against A&M. You played so much defense. I mean, A&M almost had 40 minutes on the time of possession, I believe, during that game. That's really difficult if you're Mississippi State's defense.
So what does that tell you? When we go back to the offense, control the clock.
You have
control
to.
the clock. It's so important.
And how do you do that? You run the ball.
Exactly. Your defense is going to make plays. You've seen that over the season. Defense is, 11 turnovers through 6 games?
Best in the country.
Have had an interception.
SEC,
has had an interception in every single game. You've got defensive players that are going to make a difference. You just got to balance the time of possession out or control the time of possession. You can't keep them on the field for how long you kept them on the field against A&M, especially in the fourth quarter. A&M was on the field for what felt like all of the fourth quarter is what it felt like A&M was on the field offensively. So, we'll talk a little bit more about defense, but, man, if your offense just control the clock, and you'll help your defense so much with how much they just make plays.
And they can give you the ball, right? Last year, you look at it, you only had 12 turnovers the whole season. You're leading the conference with 11 going into Florida. That's a really, really big deal. You are giving your offense the opportunity. Your offense is just not capitalizing. They're missing their mark, and they have to capitalize and make it. We've been impressed with how the defense has been performing this year, but against Florida, last thoughts, what do you think the defense has to do to ensure the victory?
Well, I think they are going to create at least one turnover. You have to create a turnover in this game to be successful. I think if you don't create any turnovers and maybe State turns the ball over once, you're going to run into an issue. It's tough to win in the swamp. You want to build on what Florida has struggled at. I believe they're really bad in terms of turnover margin. I think they're 99th, like they are in total offense in college football. They're 99th in turnover margin in college football. You look at the interceptions from Lagway in big-time games. They went to LSU earlier in the season in their first conference game. It was a 20-10 loss. Lagway had 5 interceptions in the ball game. And also, that game being a 20-10 final also speaks to how good Florida's defense has been this season. So we're going to have to that's a separate thing, though. That's what we talked about their defense already. We know that they're good. Get Lagway to turn the football over, create some pressure, right? Make some plays. I think your defensive backs have been really good this season. We've played some pretty tight coverage. To my knowledge, we haven't been beat really. We've been beat a couple times deep, but I think we do a good job for the most part, especially when it gets condensed and the field gets condensed. We've done a good job of stopping teams in the red zone, and this is a Florida team that is solid in the red zone. So it's going to be interesting to see that kind of back and forth. And one last thing too. State's been good defensively on third downs. Florida, 126th in the nation on third down offense, 32%. That's something that you go back to the A&M game. A&M had a really bad third down offense coming in, and State really couldn't do much. A&M was way successful than they have been all season on third downs in that ball game. You got to force third and longs, and you have to force You had to force punts. You had to force turnovers in the ball game. That's stuff that that Florida struggles at, is third downs and turning the football over. You have to hone in on that and be able to have some of those, be able to force punts, be able to force interceptions, force fumbles, to be able to get your offense back on the football field. And like we mentioned with the offense, control the clock, run the football, protect Blake Shapen.
Now you have to play a complete defense from start to finish, but more so a complete offense from start to finish as you play Florida in Gainesville this Saturday coming up. But speaking of finishing, it's going to be it for us on our first episode of the Bulldog Breakdown. We thank you for joining us. My name's Connor Davis again. My co-host is Ty Golmon. We'll be back next week, preview a couple more games for volleyball, soccer, and football. We hope you have enjoyed. Like I said, thank you for watching the first episode of the Bulldog Breakdown.